The fluorescent lights in the hospital billing office buzzed overhead like angry insects as Shanice Williams stared at the paper in her trembling hands. $47,000. The number seemed to burn itself into her vision. $47,000 for her 8-year-old daughter's emergency surgery, and that was just the beginning. The follow-up treatments would cost even more. "Ma'am, we need to discuss payment arrangements," the billing specialist said, her voice professionally cold. "Without insurance coverage, we require at least half the amount up front before we can schedule the next procedure." Shanice's throat went dry. She worked 2 jobs, cleaned office buildings at night and worked at a grocery store during the day, but even working herself to exhaustion, she barely made enough to cover rent and basic necessities for herself and her 2 children. $23,000 might as well have been $23 million. "How long do I have?" Shanice managed to ask. "The surgery needs to happen within 6 weeks, or the condition could become life-threatening." Life-threatening. The words echoed in Shanice's mind as she walked through the hospital corridors in a daze. Her beautiful daughter Kira, with her bright smile and infectious laugh, needed this surgery to fix a congenital heart defect that had suddenly become critical. Her son Terrell, only 5 years old, kept asking when his sister would be well enough to play with him again. That night, Shanice arrived at the Grand Meridian Hotel for her cleaning shift with red-rimmed eyes and a heavy heart. The luxury hotel stood 40 stories high in downtown Atlanta, its gleaming marble lobby a stark contrast to the cramped apartment she called home. She'd been cleaning the executive floors for 3 years, invisible to the wealthy guests who stayed in the penthouse suites. At 2 a.m. she was cleaning the top floor when she heard something that made her pause. Sobbing. Raw, broken sobbing coming from the penthouse suite. She'd cleaned these rooms countless times and knew they were usually occupied by business executives or celebrities who valued their privacy. House rules were clear. Never disturb the guests no matter what you heard. But this wasn't the sound of someone having a bad business call or a lover's quarrel. This was the sound of someone drowning in grief, and despite everything on her mind, Shanice couldn't ignore it. She knocked gently on the door. "Excuse me, sir? Are you all right?" The sobbing stopped abruptly. After a long moment, a deep voice called out, "Go away." "I'm sorry to bother you," Shanice said through the door. "I'm just cleaning the hallway and I heard." "Are you hurt? Do you need me to call someone?" Silence stretched for what felt like minutes. Then the door opened to reveal a man in his early 40s with dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from carrying unbearable pain. Even in his wrinkled dress shirt and disheveled state, she could tell he was someone important. Someone wealthy. "You should go," he said quietly. "I don't want to be disturbed." But Shanice saw something in his eyes that reminded her of herself 3 years ago when her ex-husband left, abandoning her with 2 young children and a mountain of debt. That lost, desperate look of someone who had reached the end of their rope. "Sometimes it helps to talk to a stranger," she said gently. "Someone who won't judge you or expect anything from you." He stared at her for a long moment, taking in her simple cleaning uniform and kind face. "You don't know who I am." "No, sir, I don't. But I know what it sounds like when someone's heart is breaking." Something in her voice must have reached him because he stepped back and gestured for her to come in. The penthouse was magnificent, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and furniture that probably cost more than she made in a year. But none of that mattered when she saw the photo clutched in his hand, a beautiful woman with long blonde hair and a radiant smile. "Today marks 3 years," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 years since the accident. Since I lost everything that mattered. Shanice set down her cleaning supplies and sat carefully on the edge of a chair. "Your wife." He nodded, sinking into the couch across from her. "Caroline. We were supposed to have dinner together that night, but I had a business meeting that ran late. She was driving home alone in the rain and a drunk driver." His voice broke. "I'm so sorry," Shanice said, meaning it completely. "Everyone says it wasn't my fault, but if I hadn't chosen that meeting over dinner with my wife, she'd still be alive. I chose money over love, and now I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but it means nothing. Nothing at all." They sat in silence for a while, 2 strangers sharing the weight of their different but equally crushing burdens. Finally he looked up at her. "What's your name?" "Shanice Williams." "I'm Jonathan Mitchell." Even with her limited knowledge of Atlanta's business world, Shanice knew that name. Mitchell Industries was one of the largest real estate development companies in the South. This man owned half the city. How could someone with everything look so broken? But then she thought of her own situation, of little Kira sleeping fitfully at home with a heart that might stop working if she couldn't get the surgery, and she realized that money couldn't fix everything, but the lack of it could destroy everything. "Mr. Mitchell," she began hesitantly, "can I ask you something? Do you think your wife would want you to spend the rest of your life drowning in guilt and sorrow?" He looked startled by the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if she loved you the way you clearly loved her, wouldn't she want you to find a way to be happy again? To live instead of just surviving?" Before he could answer, Shanice's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from her neighbor who watched the kids at night. "Kira had another episode. Not serious but scary. She's asking for you." Panic shot through Shanice's chest. She stood up quickly. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Mitchell. I have to go. My daughter. Is everything all right?" The concern in his voice was genuine. Shanice hesitated. She'd never told anyone about her problems, had always kept her struggles private. But something about this moment, about meeting someone else who was fighting their own impossible battle, made her words spill out. "She needs surgery. A heart surgery that costs more money than I'll ever have, and if she doesn't get it soon." She couldn't finish the sentence. Jonathan studied her face and she saw something shift in his expression. A spark of purpose that hadn't been there moments before. "How much?" he asked simply. $47,000. He was quiet for a long moment, then walked to a desk and pulled out a checkbook. Shanice watched in stunned silence as he wrote something and tore out a check. "Here," he said, holding it out to her. She looked at the check and nearly fainted. It was made out for $50,000. "I can't take this," she whispered, even though every fiber of her being wanted to snatch that check and run straight to the hospital. "Why not?" "Because I have nothing to give you in return. Because I don't even know you. Because—" She stopped, realizing how foolish she sounded when her daughter's life was at stake. What kind of mother am I, standing here questioning a miracle? But as she looked at this broken billionaire who had just offered to save her daughter's life, a strange thought occurred to her. Maybe she did have something to give him in return. Maybe she had exactly what he needed, just like he had exactly what she needed. Have you ever wondered what happens when two people who have lost everything find each other at their darkest moment? Like and subscribe to see how this incredible story unfolds, and comment below. What would you do if a stranger offered to change your life forever? Shanice held the check in her hands, feeling the weight of $50,000 and everything it represented. Her daughter's life. Her family's future. But as she looked at Jonathan Mitchell, still rumpled and broken looking despite his incredible generosity, she found herself thinking about what he'd said about choosing money over love, about having everything but feeling empty. "Mr. Mitchell," she said slowly, "I can't just take this money. It wouldn't be right." "Why not?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "You need it, I have it. It's simple. Nothing in life is that simple." She set the check carefully on the coffee table between them. "What you did tonight, listening to me, letting me sit with you when you were hurting, that meant something. But if I just take your money and disappear, what does that make me?" Jonathan frowned. "It makes you a mother doing whatever it takes to save her child. Maybe. Or maybe it makes me just another person who took something from you and gave nothing back." She took a deep breath, her heart pounding as she prepared to say something that might sound crazy. "What if we made a real deal? Something that helps both of us." "What kind of deal?" Shanice's mind raced. She thought about his words. "I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but it means nothing." She thought about the raw pain in his voice when he talked about losing his wife, about choosing work over dinner, about being alone with his grief for 3 years. "You offered me money for one night," she began carefully, "but what I heard tonight was a man who's been alone too long. A man who's forgotten what it feels like to have someone care about whether he comes home safe, whether he's eating right, whether he's drowning in grief at 2 in the morning. Jonathan's eyes narrowed slightly. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that instead of one night, you let me into your life properly. Not for anything inappropriate," she said quickly, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "But as someone who could be a real companion. Someone who could remind you how to live instead of just survive." "For how long?" Shanice's heart hammered against her ribs as she prepared to say the words that would either change everything or end this conversation immediately. "For forever if you'll let me. For as long as it takes to fill that lonely life of yours with love and laughter and kindness." The silence that followed felt like it lasted an hour. Jonathan stared at her as if she'd just suggested they fly to the moon together. "You want to what?" "I want to date you," she said, the words coming out stronger now that she'd committed to them. "Really date you. Not some business arrangement or one-night thing. I want to get to know who you are when you're not drowning in grief. I want to cook dinner for you and ask about your day and introduce you to my children." I want to show you what it feels like to have a family again. You don't know me, Jonathan said quietly. I could be anyone. I could be dangerous. Are you? No, but. Then we'll figure out the rest as we go. Shanice leaned forward, her voice earnest. Mr. Mitchell, you said your wife wouldn't want you to spend your life in grief. Well, I don't think she'd want you spending it alone either. And my kids, they need stability. They need to see what a good man looks like, how a real partnership works. Jonathan was quiet for a long time, turning the idea over in his mind. You're talking about a relationship. A real relationship. I'm talking about giving each other what we both need. You need someone to remind you that life can be beautiful. I need. She gestured around the luxurious penthouse. Obviously I need financial stability. But more than that, I need someone I can trust with my children's hearts. Someone who won't disappear when things get difficult. And you think I'm that person? I think you could be. I think underneath all that grief and guilt is a man who knows how to love deeply and completely. I saw it in how you talked about your wife. I saw it in how you immediately wanted to help my daughter without asking for anything in return. She picked up the check again, holding it between them. This isn't about money, not really. This is about two people who have been carrying heavy loads alone for too long. What if we carried them together? Jonathan stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You realize what you're asking? You're asking a billionaire widower to date a single mother who cleans hotels at night. The media attention alone would be complicated, Shanice finished. I know. But Mr. Mitchell, everything worthwhile is complicated. Easy doesn't change your life. Easy doesn't save it either. He turned back to her. Why me? You could find someone else, someone without all my baggage. Because you're the one who's here right now when I needed someone most. Because you understand loss and loneliness, and because... She hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. Because when you open that door tonight, even broken and grieving, you let a stranger in. That tells me something about who you are underneath everything else. What if it doesn't work? What if we try this and it falls apart? Then at least we tried. At least we both took a chance on something real instead of staying stuck in our separate kinds of pain. Jonathan came back to the couch and sat down, picking up the check. If we do this, there have to be ground rules. This isn't charity, and it's not a business transaction. If we're going to try to build something real, it has to be real from the beginning. Meaning? Meaning I pay for your daughter's surgery because that's what someone does for a person they care about. Not because of any deal or arrangement, but because it's the right thing to do. And then we see if we can build something genuine together. Shanice felt tears prick her eyes. You'd do that. Caroline always said the best way to honor love is to spread more love in the world. Maybe she'd approve of me finally taking that advice. And if we realize we're not right for each other, then we'll figure it out like adults. But Shanice, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Really sure? Because once we start down this road, everything changes. Shanice thought about Kira's bright smile, about Terrell's excited chatter, about the long nights she'd spent worrying and the longer days she'd spent working herself to exhaustion. Then she thought about the man sitting across from her, wealthy beyond imagination but so lonely he'd opened his door to a stranger in the middle of the night. I'm sure, she said. Are you? Jonathan looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his eyes. Not just the grief and exhaustion that had been there before, but something else. Something that might have been hope. I'm terrified, he said honestly. But for the first time in 3 years, I'm terrified of something that might be wonderful instead of something that might be terrible. So is that a yes? That's a yes to trying. A yes to seeing what happens when two people decide to stop surviving and start living. He handed her the check again, and this time she took it. But the paper felt different in her hands now. It wasn't charity or a transaction. It was the first gift between two people who had decided to take a leap of faith together. So what happens now? She asked. Now you go home to your daughter and get her the medical care she needs. And tomorrow, if you're still sure about this, you introduce me to the two most important people in your life. And then? Jonathan smiled, and it was the first genuine smile she'd seen from him all night. Then we figure out how to build a life together. The next morning, Shanice stood outside the children's hospital with the check in her purse, still hardly believing the previous night had been real. But the money was real, and more importantly, so was the promise of hope it represented. Not just for Kira's surgery, but for the possibility of a different kind of future. She'd called in sick to both her jobs, something she never did, but scheduling Kira's surgery couldn't wait. The relief on the surgeon's face when she presented the payment was worth every anxious moment she'd spent wondering if this was all too good to be true. "We can schedule the procedure for next Tuesday," Dr. Peterson said, reviewing Kira's file. "With this surgery, her prognosis is excellent. She'll be able to live a completely normal, active life." A completely normal life. The words echoed in Shanice's mind as she drove home to tell her children the good news. Kira could play soccer like she'd always wanted. Terrell wouldn't have to worry about his sister getting too tired to read him bedtime stories. But as the initial euphoria began to settle, reality crept in. She'd made a deal with a man she barely knew, a deal that sounded reasonable in the emotional intensity of 2 a.m. but seemed almost absurd in the bright light of day. What did she really know about Jonathan Mitchell besides his grief and his wealth? Her phone rang as she pulled into her apartment complex parking lot. An unknown number. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Shanice? It's Jonathan. I hope it's all right that I called." His voice was different than it had been last night. Clearer, more composed. More like what she imagined a billionaire businessman would sound like. "Of course. I was actually just coming back from the hospital. They can do Kira's surgery next week." "That's wonderful news." There was genuine warmth in his voice. "How are you feeling about everything?" "Grateful," she said honestly. "And nervous." "About the surgery?" "About everything." "Jonathan, in the light of day, what we talked about last night, it still feels right to you." He was quiet for a moment. "It feels terrifying and right at the same time." "Is that normal?" "I hope so, because that's exactly how I feel too." "Good. That's good. Listen, I was wondering if you'd like to have lunch today. Somewhere quiet where we can talk properly, establish some ground rules before we involve your children." Shanice looked down at her cleaning uniform and laughed. "I'm not exactly dressed for lunch with a billionaire." "You're dressed like a hard-working mother who just saved her daughter's life. That's the most beautiful thing anyone could wear." The compliment caught her off guard and she felt warmth spread through her chest. "Okay. But somewhere casual. I don't own the kind of clothes you probably see at your usual restaurants. How about a picnic? There's a park near downtown. We could grab some sandwiches and sit by the lake." A picnic. She'd expected him to suggest some five-star restaurant with tiny portions and intimidating wine lists. Instead, he was suggesting the kind of simple, relaxed afternoon she might have planned herself. "That sounds perfect." They met 2 hours later at Piedmont Park. Shanice had changed into her best jeans and a blue sweater that brought out her eyes, but she still felt underdressed until she saw Jonathan walking toward her in khakis and a simple polo shirt, looking more like a suburban dad than a business mogul. "You look beautiful," he said when he reached her, and the compliment felt genuine, not like something he felt obligated to say. "Thank you. You look different. More relaxed." "I feel different. I actually slept last night. First real sleep I've had in months." They found a spot under a large oak tree and spread out the blanket Jonathan had brought. He'd stopped at a deli and gotten sandwiches, chips, and sweet tea, nothing fancy but exactly the kind of food that made a picnic feel comfortable and easy. "So," Jonathan said as they settled on the blanket, "we should probably talk about what we're actually doing here." "Probably," Shanice agreed, unwrapping her sandwich. "Can I ask you something first?" "Anything." "Why did you really say yes? To this whole arrangement, I mean. It wasn't just loneliness, was it?" Jonathan considered the question while he opened his drink. "No, it wasn't just loneliness. It was, when you talked about filling my life with love and laughter and kindness, it reminded me of something Caroline used to say. She said I worked too hard, worried too much, forgot how to enjoy simple things. She was always trying to get me to slow down, to notice the good moments instead of just rushing toward the next goal. And you think I could do that for you?" "I think you already did." Last night, for the first time in 3 years, I had a conversation that wasn't about business or grief or guilt. I remembered what it felt like to connect with another human being. Shanice nodded, understanding. "For me, it was seeing someone else who understood what it meant to lose the most important thing in your life and keep going anyway. But also seeing someone who had the power to help and chose to use it for good." "So what are we hoping to build here?" Jonathan asked. "What does success look like?" "Honestly, I'm hoping to build a family. Not just for my kids to have financial security, but for all of us to have emotional security. For my children to see what a healthy relationship looks like, and for you to remember what it feels like to come home to people who care about you. And if romantic feelings develop naturally?" Shanice felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Then we'll deal with that when it happens. But Jonathan, I need you to know that I'm not going into this expecting anything physical. This isn't about using my attraction to you to secure my children's future. Are you attracted to me? He asked, and there was something almost vulnerable in the question. I think you're a handsome man, she said carefully. But more than that, I'm attracted to your kindness. To the way you listened to me last night without judgment. To the fact that you could have just written me a check and sent me away, but instead you took a risk on something more meaningful. I'm attracted to your courage, Jonathan said quietly. To the way you saw someone in pain and couldn't just walk away. To the fact that when life knocked you down, you got back up and kept fighting for your children. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, watching ducks paddle around the small lake. Finally, Jonathan spoke again. If we're going to do this, we need to be clear about boundaries and expectations. Okay. First, your children's needs always come first. Always. If they're not comfortable with me, if this arrangement is hard on them in any way, we stop immediately. Agreed. And first for me, if you ever make either of my children feel like they owe you something because of your financial support, this ends immediately. Fair enough. Second, we take this slowly. I don't want to disrupt your children's lives with too much change too fast. That makes sense. And second for me, we're honest with each other. If this isn't working, if you're having second thoughts, if you meet someone else, we talk about it instead of letting it fester. Definitely. Third, we present a united front to the outside world. The media, my business associates, your friends and family, everyone needs to understand that this is a real relationship, not some arrangement. Shanice nodded. Because if people think it's fake, it'll be harder for my kids to trust it's real. Exactly. And third for me, we each maintain some independence. I don't want to become dependent on you for my happiness, and you shouldn't feel like you have to be available to me every moment. That's important, Jonathan agreed. Healthy relationships need space to breathe. They continued establishing ground rules and expectations, covering everything from how they'd handle holidays to what they'd tell people about how they met. With each agreement, the arrangement felt less strange and more like the foundation for something that could actually work. One more thing, Jonathan said as they packed up their picnic. I'd like to meet your children soon, but I want you to prepare them properly. They should know who I am and why I'm in your life, at least the basics. What should I tell them about you? Tell them I'm someone who cares about their mother and wants to get to know them. Tell them I'm going to help with some of their expenses, but that doesn't change anything about how much their mother loves them or how hard she's worked for them. And what will you tell people about me? Jonathan smiled, and again she was struck by how different he looked when he wasn't carrying the weight of grief alone. I'll tell them you're the woman who reminded me that life is meant to be lived, not just endured. And that I'm lucky enough that you're giving me a chance to prove I'm worth taking a risk on. As they walked back to their cars, Shanice felt a flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. Tomorrow she'd introduce Jonathan Mitchell to Kira and Terrell. Tomorrow they'd start finding out whether this leap of faith would lead to the soft landing of a real family or the hard ground of another disappointment. But for the first time in years, the possibility of happiness felt stronger than the fear of heartbreak. Sunday afternoon, Shanice stood in her small kitchen making chocolate chip cookies and trying not to pace. She'd spent the morning explaining to Kira and Terrell that a new friend was coming over, someone special who had helped with Kira's surgery money. She'd kept it simple but honest, telling them that Jonathan was someone she cared about and hoped they'd like. Is he your boyfriend, Mama? Kira had asked, always direct in the way 8-year-olds could be. He might be, baby girl. We're getting to know each other. But what matters most is how you and Terrell feel about him. Now, as she pulled the cookies from the oven, she wondered if she'd made a mistake. Her apartment was tiny compared to Jonathan's penthouse, furnished with second-hand pieces and decorated with the children's artwork. What would a billionaire think of their humble home? The doorbell rang at exactly 3 o'clock. He's here, Terrell announced, running to the window to peek out. Shanice smoothed her dress and opened the door. Jonathan stood there holding a bouquet of sunflowers and looking almost as nervous as she felt. He dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, but she could see the effort he'd made to appear approachable. Hi, he said softly. Hi yourself. She accepted the flowers, touched that he'd chosen sunflowers over roses. Sunflowers were cheerful and bright, the kind of flowers that belonged in a family kitchen. Come in and meet my babies. Kira and Terrell stood in the living room, clearly curious but hanging back shyly. Jonathan knelt down to their eye level, a gesture that immediately earned him points with Shanice. You must be Kira, he said gently. Your mom tells me you're very brave. I have to have heart surgery, Kira said matter-of-factly. But it's going to make me all better so I can play soccer. Soccer's a great sport. I used to play when I was your age. Were you good? Jonathan laughed. I was terrible. But I had fun and that's what mattered. Terrell stepped forward, emboldened by his sister's easy conversation. Are you really rich like Mama said? Terrell, Shanice said quickly, but Jonathan held up a hand. It's okay. Yes, Terrell, I have a lot of money. But you know what I've learned? Money can't buy the most important things. Like what? Like having people who love you. Like having a family who cares if you're sad or happy. Like having friends who make you laugh. Terrell considered this seriously. Do you have friends who make you laugh? Not many, Jonathan admitted. That's one of the things I'm hoping to change. They moved to the kitchen where the smell of fresh cookies filled the air. Jonathan complimented everything from Shanice's cooking to the children's artwork on the refrigerator, but it didn't feel forced or patronizing. He seemed genuinely interested in their small world. Over milk and cookies he asked the children about school, their interests, their dreams. He listened carefully to their answers and asked follow-up questions that showed he was really paying attention. When Kira mentioned wanting to be a veterinarian, he told her about his own dog growing up. When Terrell talked about loving to build things with blocks, Jonathan described some of the buildings his company had constructed. Can we see them sometime? Terrell asked excitedly. If your mom says it's okay, I'd love to show you. After the children finished their snacks and went to play in their room, Shanice and Jonathan sat at her small kitchen table. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, making everything feel warm and golden. They're wonderful, Jonathan said quietly. Smart, kind, curious, you should be proud. I am. They're the best thing I've ever done. She paused. What did you think of this? Of our home? I think it's exactly what a home should be. Warm, lived in, full of love. My house, it's beautiful, but it hasn't felt like a home in a long time. Would you like it too? Jonathan met her eyes. Very much. They were interrupted by Kira running back into the kitchen. Mr. Jonathan, do you want to see my room? I'd love to. Shanice watched as her daughter led Jonathan down the narrow hallway, chattering about her stuffed animals and books. She could hear Terrell joining them, showing off his collection of toy cars. Their voices mixed together, punctuated by Jonathan's genuine interest and occasional laughter. When they returned to the kitchen, both children seemed completely comfortable with their new friend. Mama, Kira said, can Mr. Jonathan come to my surgery with us? Shanice felt her breath catch. She looked at Jonathan, wondering if the request would scare him off. If Mr. Jonathan wants to and if his schedule allows it, then yes, baby. I wouldn't miss it, Jonathan said immediately. If you want me there, I'll be there. As the afternoon wore on, they played board games, looked at photo albums, and talked about everything from favorite movies to dream vacations. Jonathan fit into their family dynamic more naturally than Shanice had dared to hope. He was patient with Terrell's endless questions, gentle with Kira's occasional fatigue, and helpful without being intrusive. When it came time for him to leave, both children hugged him goodbye without any prompting from Shanice. Will you come back soon? Terrell asked. If you want me to. We do, Kira said firmly. Right, Mama? Right, Shanice agreed, walking Jonathan to the door. They stepped outside onto her small front porch and Jonathan turned to face her. That was perfect, he said softly. They're amazing kids, Shanice. You've done an incredible job raising them. They seem to like you. The feeling is mutual. I haven't felt that relaxed in years. Just sitting around a kitchen table, listening to children laugh, being part of a family conversation. I'd forgotten how good that could feel. Good. Because if this is going to work, they have to be comfortable with you. They're part of the package deal. I know. And honestly, that doesn't scare me as much as I thought it would. I like who I am when I'm around them. When I'm around all of you. Who are you when you're around us? Jonathan thought for a moment. Someone who remembers that life can be simple and beautiful. Someone who looks forward to coming home instead of dreading the quiet. That's exactly who I was hoping you could be. He reached out and took her hand, the first intentionally intimate gesture between them. His hand was warm and strong and holding it felt natural. Shanice, I want you to know that today didn't feel like an arrangement or a deal. It felt like the beginning of something real. It did for me too, she admitted. But Jonathan, we're still taking this slowly, right? For their sake and ours. Absolutely. But slowly doesn't mean we can't be hopeful. After he left, Shanice found herself humming while she cleaned up the kitchen. The children were already asking when Jonathan would visit again, and for the first time since her divorce, she felt like they might actually have a chance at the kind of stable, loving family she'd always wanted to give them. 3 weeks later, Jonathan sat in the hospital waiting room holding Terrell on his lap while Kira underwent her surgery. Shanice paced beside the window, too nervous to sit still. They'd spent every day together since that first Sunday, building routines and inside jokes, learning each other's habits and preferences. Is Kira going to be okay? Terrell asked for the 10th time. The doctors are very good at fixing hearts, Jonathan said gently. And your sister is very strong. Mama says you had a wife before who went to heaven. Shanice stopped pacing and looked over, ready to intervene if the topic was too painful for Jonathan. But he just adjusted Terrell more comfortably on his lap. I did. Her name was Caroline. Do you miss her? Every day. But you know what I've learned? Missing someone doesn't mean you can't love new people too. Your heart doesn't run out of room for love. So you can love Mama and us and still miss Caroline? Exactly. Terrell seemed satisfied with this answer and went back to coloring in his activity book. But the conversation stayed with Shanice as the hours passed. Jonathan had mentioned Caroline several times over the past weeks, always with love but without the crushing grief she'd witnessed that first night. He was healing slowly but surely. When Dr. Peterson finally emerged with news that the surgery had been a complete success, they all cried with relief. Jonathan's arms came around both Shanice and Terrell, and for a moment they stood there as a unit, celebrating together. 2 days later they brought Kira home with strict instructions for rest and recovery. Jonathan had surprised them by having groceries delivered and flowers placed throughout the apartment. Nothing too extravagant, just thoughtful touches that made their homecoming feel special. I have something for you, he told Kira as she settled on the couch with her favorite blanket. He handed her a wrapped package that turned out to be a beautiful hardcover book about a young girl who wanted to become a veterinarian. I thought you might like to read about someone with the same dream as you. Thank you, Kira said, hugging the book. Will you read it with me? I'd love to. As Jonathan settled beside Kira to begin the first chapter, Shanice felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't a wealthy man playing at being part of a family. This was a man who genuinely cared about her children, who remembered their interests and wanted to nurture their dreams. That evening, after the children were asleep, she and Jonathan sat on her small balcony sharing a cup of tea. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. What changed? Between that first night when you were so broken and now? You seem, not completely healed but definitely healing. Jonathan was quiet for a long time, looking out at the city lights. Having something to look forward to again. Having people who need me for more than just my money or business decisions. Having a reason to come home that isn't just about avoiding the empty house. Is that all? No. He turned to look at her. It's also having someone who sees the man I could be instead of just the man I've been. You never treat me like I'm fragile or broken. You just expect me to be better. And somehow that makes it easier to actually be better. You were always better, Jonathan. You just forgot for a while. Maybe. But Shanice, I need you to know something. What we have, what we're building. It's not just about me healing from losing Caroline. It's about me falling for you. The words hung in the air between them. Shanice felt her heart speed up. Falling for me? The way you mother your children with such fierce love and gentleness. The way you work so hard without ever complaining. The way you saw a stranger in pain and couldn't just walk away. The way you make even ordinary moments feel special just by being present for them. Jonathan. I'm not asking you to say anything back. I just needed you to know that this isn't gratitude or loneliness or some kind of rebound relationship. This is me falling in love with an extraordinary woman who happened to walk into my life when I needed her most. Shanice set down her teacup and turned to face him fully. What if I told you the feeling was mutual? Is it? I'm falling for the man who kneels down to talk to my children at their eye level. Who remembers that Terrell likes his sandwiches cut into triangles and that Kira prefers grape juice to apple juice. Who shows up to every single thing that matters to us, not because he has to but because he wants to. Shanice. I'm falling for the man who holds my hand during scary movies and lets Terrell help him shave on Sunday mornings and reads bedtime stories with different voices for every character. Jonathan reached for her hand. So what do we do now? Now we stop pretending this is just an arrangement and admit that we're building something real. Something that could last. Are you ready for that? For everything that comes with being with someone like me? Are you ready for everything that comes with being with someone like me? A single mother with 2 children and a tiny apartment and a job that requires me to work nights. I quit my night job last week actually. I'm going to work days at a daycare center. The pay is less but the hours are better for the kids and the health insurance is excellent. Jonathan smiled. You quit without telling me? I wanted to make sure I could stand on my own 2 feet. That if this thing between us ended tomorrow, I could still take care of my family. And can you? Yes. Which means when I tell you I love you, it's not because I need you to take care of us. It's because I want you to be part of our lives. You love me? I love you, Jonathan Mitchell. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you've let us love you back. He leaned forward and kissed her then, soft and sweet under the stars. It was their first real kiss, and it tasted like hope and promises and the beginning of something beautiful. When they broke apart, Jonathan rested his forehead against hers. I love you too, Shanice Williams. I love your courage and your compassion and the way you've made me remember what it feels like to be truly alive. They sat together in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the city lights twinkle below them. Tomorrow there would be challenges to face, questions to answer, adjustments to make. But tonight, they were just two people who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to step into the light together. 6 months later, Jonathan's house had been transformed. The sterile, museum-like space had given way to a home filled with children's laughter, family photos, and the comfortable chaos of daily life. Kira's art projects covered the refrigerator, Terrell's building blocks occupied one corner of the living room, and Shanice's touch was evident in every room, from the fresh flowers on the dining table to the cozy throw pillows on the couch. Shanice had moved in gradually, first staying over on weekends, then a few nights a week, until it became clear that they were happiest when they were all together. The children had their own beautifully decorated rooms, but they still preferred to pile into the master bedroom on Sunday mornings for family breakfast in bed. Jonathan, we need more syrup, Terrell announced, having apparently emptied the small pitcher onto his pancakes. More syrup coming up, Jonathan said, ruffling the boy's hair as he passed. In the past 6 months he'd become everything Shanice had hoped for and more. Not just a provider but a true partner in parenting. He helped with homework, attended parent-teacher conferences, and somehow managed to be both firm and loving when discipline was needed. Mama, look, Kira said, showing off the perfect cartwheel she'd just mastered. Her recovery from surgery had been remarkable, and she was now more active than ever. Jonathan taught me how to do it right. I see that, baby girl. Very impressive. Watching Jonathan with her children still took Shanice's breath away sometimes. He'd taken to fatherhood as naturally as if he'd been born to it. He was patient with their questions, creative with their games, and never once made them feel like burdens or interruptions to his important adult life. So, Jonathan said, settling back onto the bed with the syrup, I have some news to share with everyone. The children immediately gave him their full attention. News from Jonathan was usually good news. Remember how we talked about taking a family vacation this summer? Disney World, Terrell said immediately. You promised Disney World. I did. But I was thinking we might want to take a different kind of trip first. A shorter one. Where? Kira asked, bouncing slightly with excitement. Jonathan looked at Shanice with a smile that made her heart skip. How would you all feel about going to visit your grandparents in North Carolina? Shanice felt tears spring to her eyes. She'd been estranged from her parents since her divorce, too proud to ask for help and too ashamed of her struggles to reach out. But Jonathan had encouraged her to reconnect, and after months of phone calls and video chats, her parents had invited them all to visit. Really? She whispered. Really? I talked to your father yesterday, and he said they have the guest rooms ready and your mother has been cooking for 3 days straight. Grandma and Grandpa want to meet you, Kira told Jonathan seriously. Mama talks about you all the time when she calls them. What does she say? Jonathan asked, winking at Shanice. That you're the best thing that ever happened to us, Terrell said matter-of-factly. And that you make her happy. Well, you all make me happy too. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Shanice and Jonathan sat in their favorite spot on the back patio. The house came with a beautiful garden that Shanice had taken over, planting vegetables and flowers with the children's help. It was nothing like the perfectly manicured landscaping that had been there before, but it was alive and colorful and very much theirs. Are you nervous about meeting my parents? Shanice asked. Terrified, Jonathan admitted. What if they don't think I'm good enough for you? That's not going to be a problem. How can you be so sure? Because they can see how happy I am. In our video calls, when I talk about you, I light up. When the kids talk about you, they get so excited they can barely sit still. My parents know that you've given us everything we never dared to hope for. Not just money, I hope. Especially not money. You've given us stability, security, love, laughter. You've given us a family. My parents have been worried about me for years, watching me struggle and not knowing how to help. Now they see their daughter thriving and their grandchildren flourishing. They're going to love you because we love you. Jonathan reached for her hand, bringing it to his lips to press a gentle kiss to her palm. I still can't believe this is my life. 6 months ago, I was a ghost living in an empty house. Now I have bedtime stories to read and school events to attend and someone who asks me about my day and actually wants to hear the answer. And I went from working 2 jobs and lying awake at night worrying about money to having a partner who shares every burden and doubles every joy. Do you ever miss your independence? Your old life? Shanice considered the question seriously. I miss some things. I miss the sense of accomplishment that came from solving every problem on my own. But I don't miss the exhaustion or the constant worry or the loneliness. And I love that my children get to see what a real partnership looks like. What do you mean? They see you washing dishes and me paying bills. They see you braiding Kira's hair and me helping you with spreadsheets for work. They see us making decisions together, supporting each other, being a team. That's something I never had in my marriage and it's something I always wanted them to see. Your ex-husband. Do you think he'll ever be a problem? It was a question they danced around for months. Marcus had disappeared from their lives completely after the divorce, sending no child support and making no effort to see Kira and Terrell. Legally he still had rights but he'd shown no interest in exercising them. I don't think so. He made it clear that he wanted no responsibility for the children. I doubt that's changed just because our circumstances have improved. But if it did change? If he came back? Then we'd deal with it together. The same way we deal with everything else. Jonathan nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of their neighborhood. Shanice still sometimes marveled at the quietness of their street compared to the noise of her old apartment complex. The children loved having a yard to play in, and she loved the sense of safety and peace that came with their new home. Shanice, Jonathan said eventually, there's something I want to talk to you about. Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his wedding ring. He still wore it and she'd never asked him to remove it. Caroline would always be part of his story, and Shanice had no desire to erase that history. What is it? I've been thinking about our future. About what we want this to look like long term. Okay. I love our life together. I love waking up next to you and coming home to you and being part of your children's daily lives. But I want more than that. Shanice felt her heart start to race. What kind of more? I want to make it official. Legal. I want to marry you, Shanice. I want to adopt Kira and Terrell if you'll let me. I want us to be a real family in every sense of the word. She stared at him, hardly believing what she was hearing. Are you proposing to me? Not yet. Not properly. But I'm telling you that I want to. That I'm ready to if you think you might be ready to say yes. Tears filled Shanice's eyes as the magnitude of what he was offering hit her. Not just marriage but adoption. Not just a commitment to her but a legal, permanent commitment to her children. The security she'd always dreamed of giving them, wrapped up in a love she'd never expected to find. Jonathan. You don't have to answer now. I just wanted you to know where my heart is, where I see this going. I love you and I love Kira and Terrell, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to all of you every single day. You already prove it every single day. So is that a yes to thinking about it? Shanice leaned over and kissed him, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into the gesture. When they broke apart, she rested her hand against his cheek. That's a yes to more than thinking about it. That's a yes to the idea that we've already become the family we were meant to be, and now we just need to make it official. Jonathan's smile was brighter than the stars overhead. Really? Really? I love you, Jonathan Mitchell. And I want to spend the rest of my life loving you. As they held each other under the night sky, surrounded by the home they'd built together and the life they'd created, Shanice felt a deep sense of completion. This was what happiness looked like. This was what love was supposed to feel like. And this was only the beginning. Are you crying happy tears yet? Drop a heart in the comments if this love story is giving you all the feels, and don't forget to subscribe to see how Jonathan's proposal unfolds in the most romantic way possible. The first real test of their relationship came from an unexpected source, Jonathan's business world. At a charity gala they attended together, Shanice overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. It's so obvious what she's after, a woman in an expensive dress was saying to her companion. Single mother, 2 children, working as a cleaner when they met? Please. She hit the lottery and she knows it. I heard she wouldn't even sleep with him until he agreed to pay for some medical procedure, the other woman replied. Very clever, really. Much more sophisticated than the usual gold digger approach. Shanice felt like she'd been slapped. She excused herself from the group she'd been chatting with and found refuge in the ladies' room, trying to compose herself. She'd known there would be people who questioned their relationship, but hearing the cruel speculation spoken so casually was harder than she'd expected. There you are, Jonathan said when she finally emerged. I was looking for you. Are you all right? You look upset. I'm fine, she said automatically, then caught herself. They'd promised to be honest with each other. Actually, I'm not fine. I overheard some women talking about us. About me. Jonathan's expression darkened. What did they say? It doesn't matter. It does matter. Tell me. Reluctantly, Shanice repeated the conversation. With each word, Jonathan's jaw tightened further. I'm sorry, he said when she finished. I should have prepared you better for this. Should have warned you that some people would say cruel things. It's not your fault. I knew people would think it, but hearing it said out loud was harder than I expected. Do you want to leave? No. If we leave, it looks like they're right. Like I have something to be ashamed of. You have nothing to be ashamed of, Shanice. Nothing. I know that. And you know that. But they don't, and there are going to be more of them. Jonathan took her hands in his. Look at me. I don't care what anyone else thinks about how we met or why we're together. I know the truth. You know the truth. Our children know the truth. Everyone else can think whatever they want. But what if it affects your business? What if people start questioning your judgment or? Then I'll deal with it. Shanice, you and the children are more important to me than any business relationship or social standing. If people can't accept that I'm with you because I love you, then I don't need them in my life. His conviction helped settle some of her anxiety, but the evening had planted seeds of doubt that continued to grow over the following weeks. She found herself second-guessing her place in Jonathan's world, wondering if she was holding him back or embarrassing him. The doubts came to a head 3 weeks later when Jonathan's business partner, Richard Carmichael, requested a private meeting with Shanice. She agreed to meet him for coffee, curious about what he wanted to discuss. Richard was polished and professional, the kind of man who'd been born into wealth and privilege. He smiled warmly as he sat down across from her, but there was something calculating in his eyes. Thank you for meeting with me, Shanice. I hope you don't mind the informal setting. Not at all. What did you want to discuss? Jonathan's happiness, primarily. I've known him for 15 years, and I haven't seen him this content since before Caroline died. You've been very good for him. He's been good for me too. I'm sure he has. And that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Richard leaned forward slightly. I'm concerned that Jonathan might be moving too fast, making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. What kind of decisions? Marriage. Adoption. Permanently altering his life for a relationship that's still quite new. Shanice felt her defenses rise. Our relationship might be new, but our feelings aren't superficial. Of course not. But Shanice, you have to understand Jonathan's position. He's worth several $100 million. He's grieving, lonely, vulnerable to someone who might take advantage of that vulnerability. Are you suggesting that I'm taking advantage of him? I'm suggesting that you might not fully understand the implications of what you're asking him to commit to. Marriage to you means he becomes legally responsible for your children's welfare for the rest of their lives. It means you have access to his wealth, his assets, his entire financial world. I never asked him for any of that. But you accepted it. The house, the lifestyle, the security. You let him pay for your daughter's surgery and quit your job so he could support you. Each word felt like a dagger. Richard was voicing every insecurity she'd ever had about her relationship with Jonathan, every fear that she was taking too much and giving too little in return. What exactly are you asking me to do? I'm asking you to consider whether this is really what's best for Jonathan long-term. Whether a man of his position and status might be better served by someone from his own world, someone who understands the demands and expectations of his lifestyle. Someone like Caroline. Caroline was his equal in every way. Education, background, social standing. She enhanced his life without complicating it. Shanice sat back in her chair, feeling sick. You want me to break up with him? I want you to think honestly about whether you're the right woman for him, or whether you're just the woman he met when he was at his lowest point. The meeting ended shortly after that, with Richard's parting words echoing in Shanice's mind. If you really love him, you'll want what's best for him, even if that's not you. She drove home in a daze, Richard's arguments swirling through her thoughts. Was she holding Jonathan back? Was she asking too much of him? Would he be better off with someone who could match his wealth and status? That evening she was quiet during dinner, distracted during the children's bedtime routine, and distant when she and Jonathan finally had time alone. What's wrong? He asked as they got ready for bed. You've been somewhere else all evening. I had coffee with Richard Carmichael today. Jonathan's hands stilled on the buttons of his shirt. He asked to meet with you? What did he want? To suggest that I might not be the right woman for you. What? Shanice repeated the conversation, watching Jonathan's expression grow darker with each detail. He had no right, Jonathan said when she finished. No right to approach you, no right to question our relationship, no right to make you doubt what we have. But what if he's right? What if I'm asking too much of you? What if you'd be happier with someone from your own world? Jonathan crossed the room and took her face in his hands. Shanice, look at me. Do I seem unhappy to you? No, but do I seem like I'm sacrificing anything important? You might not realize what you're giving up. I'm not giving up anything. I'm gaining everything. A family, a purpose, a reason to wake up excited about the day ahead. Richard is wrong and he's interfering in something that's none of his business. But the social stuff, the business implications, are meaningless compared to what we have. Shanice, I don't need someone who matches my bank account or my background. I need someone who matches my heart. Someone who makes me want to be the best version of myself. Someone who loves me for who I am, not what I have. That's what I do. That's exactly what you do. And if Richard or anyone else has a problem with that, they can find new friends and new business partners. You'd really do that? Risk your business relationships for me? I'd risk everything for you. For us. Because this family we've built together is worth more than any amount of money or social approval. Shanice felt the knot of anxiety in her chest begin to loosen. I love you. I love you too. And tomorrow, I'm going to have a very direct conversation with Richard about boundaries and respect. Don't ruin your friendship because of me. Shanice, a real friend would be happy about my happiness. A real friend would support the relationship that's brought me back to life. Richard is protecting his own interests, not mine. As they lay in bed that night, Shanice reflected on the difference between Jonathan's certainty and Richard's doubts. Jonathan saw their love as a gift to be treasured. Richard saw it as a problem to be solved. She knew which perspective felt right. She knew which one honored the truth of what they'd built together. But she also knew that Richard's challenge was only the beginning. There would be other people, other obstacles, other tests of their commitment to each other. The question was whether their love was strong enough to weather whatever storms might come. The storm came 6 weeks later in the form of a certified letter delivered on a Saturday morning. Shanice signed for it while Jonathan was outside teaching Terrell how to ride a bike and Kira was practicing piano in the living room. When she saw the return address, her blood turned to ice. Marcus Thompson, attorney at law. Her ex-husband had become a lawyer. With trembling fingers, she opened the letter and read the legal language that essentially boiled down to: Marcus was petitioning for joint custody of Kira and Terrell, claiming that Shanice's new lifestyle had materially changed the children's circumstances and that he deserved the opportunity to be part of their lives. The letter made it clear that Marcus knew about Jonathan, about their living situation, about the surgery and the house and everything that had changed since she'd built a life with the man she loved. It also made it clear that Marcus saw an opportunity to benefit from Jonathan's wealth. Mama, what's wrong? Kira asked, noticing Shanice's pale face. Nothing, baby girl. Just some grown-up male. But it wasn't nothing. It was everything. Marcus had abandoned his children, provided no support, made no contact for over 3 years. Now that their circumstances had improved dramatically, he wanted back in. The worst part was the timing. Jonathan had been planning to propose during their trip to meet her parents next month. They talked about the adoption process, about making their family legal and permanent. Now Marcus was threatening to destroy all of that. Shanice. Jonathan's voice called from the kitchen. Who was at the door? Just a delivery, she called back, quickly folding the letter and shoving it into her purse. She needed time to think, to figure out how to handle this without destroying the happiness they'd all found. But keeping the secret proved impossible. Over the next few days, the weight of the legal threat consumed her thoughts. She was distracted during conversations, anxious during quiet moments, and terrified of how Jonathan would react when he learned the truth. The breaking point came on Wednesday evening when Jonathan found her crying in their bedroom after the children had gone to sleep. That's it, he said, sitting beside her on the bed. You've been different all week. Something's wrong and I need you to tell me what it is. I can't. Yes, you can. We promised each other honesty, remember? Whatever it is, we'll face it together. With shaking hands, Shanice retrieved the letter from her purse and handed it to him. She watched his expression change as he read, saw the moment when understanding and anger collided on his face. When did you get this? Saturday. Saturday? You've been carrying this alone for 5 days? I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to tell you that everything we've built might be about to fall apart. Jonathan set the letter aside and pulled her into his arms. Nothing is falling apart. We're going to fight this. Jonathan, you don't understand. If Marcus gets joint custody, he can make decisions about the children's lives. He can object to the adoption. He can drag us through court for years, making everything public, questioning our relationship. So we'll deal with it. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. Jonathan's voice was fierce. Those are my children too in every way that matters. I've been their father for 8 months. I've held them when they were sick, helped them with homework, celebrated their victories and comforted their defeats. Some man who abandoned them doesn't get to waltz back in and threaten our family. But legally, I have more resources than Marcus could ever dream of. I can hire the best family lawyers in the state. I can make sure his motives are exposed and his abandonment is documented. That could get expensive. And ugly. I don't care about expensive. And as for ugly, he's the one who chose to make it ugly by abandoning his children and then trying to profit from their improved circumstances. Shanice pulled back to look at his face. You really want to fight this? I want to protect our family. I want to protect those 2 beautiful children upstairs who call me Jonathan but look at me like I'm their dad. I want to protect the woman I love from a man who hurt her once and is trying to hurt her again. What if we lose? What if he gets custody and everything changes? Then we'll adapt. But Shanice, I don't think we're going to lose. Marcus abandoned those children when you needed help most. He provided no support, financial or emotional. He's only interested now because of my money. No judge is going to reward that behavior. You're sure? I'm sure that I love you and I love Kira and Terrell, and I'm not going to let anyone destroy what we've built together. The next morning, Jonathan called his attorney and within hours they had an appointment with the best family lawyer in Atlanta. Elizabeth Morrison was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of confidence that came from winning difficult cases. This is actually more straightforward than you might think, she said after reviewing the letter and hearing their story. Mr. Thompson abandoned his parental responsibilities for over 3 years. He's provided no financial support, made no contact with the children, and shown no interest in their welfare until their circumstances improved dramatically. But he is their biological father, Shanice said. Yes, but the court's primary concern is the children's best interests. Mr. Thompson will have to prove that his sudden interest in custody is motivated by love for his children, not financial opportunity. Given the timing and circumstances, that's going to be very difficult for him to do. What's our next step? Jonathan asked. We respond to his petition with our own documentation. School records showing the children's stability and happiness, medical records showing their improved health and care, testimony from teachers and neighbors about your family dynamic. We build a case that shows these children are thriving in their current environment and that disrupting it would be harmful to their welfare. How long will this take? If Mr. Thompson is serious about pursuing this, it could take several months. But I suspect that once he realizes the strength of your position and the resources you're prepared to deploy, he may reconsider his petition. On the drive home, Shanice felt lighter than she had in days. Thank you, she said to Jonathan. For what? For not hesitating. For not questioning whether this was worth the fight. For treating Kira and Terrell like they're really yours. They are really mine. Not biologically, but in every way that matters. I love them like they're my own, and I'm going to protect them like they're my own. Even if this gets complicated? Even if Marcus drags it out and makes it public and expensive? Even then. Shanice, do you remember what you said to me that first night? About filling my life with love and laughter and kindness? I remember. Those kids are part of that love. They're part of the life you gave me. I'm not going to let anyone take that away from us. That evening, they sat down with Kira and Terrell to explain the situation in age-appropriate terms. They were careful not to vilify Marcus, but they wanted the children to understand that there might be some legal proceedings and that nothing would change their family dynamic. Is our real dad going to take us away? Terrell asked, his small voice worried. No one is going to take you anywhere you don't want to go, Jonathan said firmly. And this is your real home with your real family. Are you going to be our real dad? Kira asked. Jonathan looked at Shanice, who nodded encouragingly. I hope so, sweetheart. If the court agrees and if you want me to be, I'd like to adopt you both officially. What does that mean? Terrell asked. It means I would be your father legally, not just in our hearts. It means no one could ever question that you belong with me and your mama. We want that, Kira said immediately. Right, Terrell? Right. You're already our dad anyway. As they tucked the children into bed that night, Shanice felt a profound sense of gratitude. Whatever challenges Marcus might bring, they would face them as a united family. And that unity, that unshakable bond they'd built together, would be stronger than any legal threat. The custody battle lasted 4 months, and it was every bit as ugly as Shanice had feared it would be. Marcus's attorney painted a picture of a woman who had abandoned her humble roots to live a life of luxury, suggesting that the children were being raised in an artificial environment that prioritized wealth over genuine family values. They questioned Jonathan's motives, his fitness as a parental figure, and even his mental stability, bringing up his grief over Caroline's death and suggesting he was using Shanice's children as emotional replacements for the family he'd lost. It was brutal and invasive, but through it all, Jonathan never wavered. He submitted to psychological evaluations, provided character references from business associates and friends, and testified with quiet dignity about his love for Shanice and the children. The turning point came when Kira and Terrell were interviewed by the court-appointed guardian. Both children, speaking separately and without coaching, expressed clear preferences about where they wanted to live and who they considered their real father. "Jonathan reads to me every night," Kira told the guardian. "He knows all my favorite books and he does different voices for the characters. He came to every doctor appointment when I had my surgery, and he held my hand when I was scared." Terrell's testimony was even more damaging to Marcus's case. "I don't really remember my other dad. Jonathan is the one who taught me to ride my bike and helps me build things. He makes my mama happy and he never yells at us." When asked if they wanted to spend time with Marcus, both children politely but firmly said no. They didn't know him, they explained, and they were happy with their family the way it was. The final blow to Marcus's petition came when Elizabeth Morrison revealed that Marcus had been researching Jonathan's net worth online and had contacted a publicist about selling his story to tabloid magazines. The court documentation showed that Marcus had never once asked about his children's health, happiness, or well-being during the entire proceedings. Judge Patricia Williams delivered her verdict on a cold February morning with all parties present. The court finds that Mr. Thompson abandoned his parental responsibilities for a period of 3 years and 8 months, she said, her voice carrying the weight of final judgment. During this time he provided no financial support, made no contact with his children, and showed no interest in their welfare. Shanice held her breath, Jonathan's hand tight in hers. The court further finds that the children have thrived in their current environment, showing improved academic performance, excellent health outcomes, and strong emotional stability. The testimony of both children makes clear their preference to remain in their current family structure. Judge Williams looked directly at Marcus. "Mr. Thompson, your petition appears to be motivated not by genuine concern for your children's welfare, but by financial opportunity. This court will not reward parental abandonment or enable what appears to be an attempt to profit from circumstances you played no role in creating. The petition for joint custody is denied." Furthermore, this court finds that termination of Mr. Thompson's parental rights would be in the best interests of both children, clearing the way for adoption proceedings should Mr. Mitchell choose to pursue them. The gavel came down with finality. Marcus's parental rights were terminated. The path was clear for Jonathan to legally adopt Kira and Terrell. Outside the courthouse, Shanice felt like she could finally breathe again. Jonathan wrapped his arms around her, and for a moment they just held each other, feeling the weight of 4 months of stress and uncertainty finally lift. "It's over," he said softly. "It's over," she agreed. They'd weathered the storm together, and their family had emerged stronger than ever. But the real celebration came 3 weeks later, on a sunny Saturday morning in the same courthouse where they'd fought for their family's future. This time they were there for a different kind of legal proceeding. Judge Williams smiled as she looked at the adoption papers before her. "Mr. Mitchell, do you understand that by adopting Kira and Terrell Williams, you are accepting all the legal responsibilities and privileges of parenthood?" "I do, Your Honor." "And you do this freely without coercion, because you believe it to be in the best interests of these children?" "I do." "Kira and Terrell, do you understand that Mr. Mitchell will become your legal father? That he will have the same rights and responsibilities as any parent?" Both children nodded eagerly. They'd been preparing for this day for weeks, understanding that it would make their family official in the eyes of the law. "Then it is my pleasure to grant this adoption petition. Mr. Mitchell, you are now the legal father of Kira and Terrell Mitchell." Mitchell. Their new last name rolled off the judge's tongue with such finality, such rightness, that Shanice felt tears spring to her eyes. As they left the courthouse that day, Jonathan carrying adoption certificates that made their family legal and permanent, Shanice reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first night when she'd found a broken man crying in a hotel suite to this day when that same man had legally committed himself to her children forever. "So what now?" she asked as they walked to their car. "Now we go home and celebrate with the biggest ice cream sundaes in Atlanta," Jonathan said, making both children cheer. "And after that?" Jonathan stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. "After that we plan a wedding." Shanice's heart skipped. "Is that a proposal?" "Not yet. But it's a promise that a proposal is coming very soon." "How soon?" Jonathan grinned, looking lighter and happier than she'd ever seen him. "How soon can you plan a family vacation to somewhere beautiful and romantic?" "Are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" "I'm thinking that I want to ask you to marry me somewhere special, somewhere that will become part of our family story forever." Kira tugged on Shanice's hand. "Mama, are you and Jonathan going to get married? Would you like that, baby girl?" "Yes." "Then we'll really be a family forever and ever." "We're already a family forever and ever," Terrell pointed out with 5-year-old logic. "The judge just said so." "You're right," Jonathan said, kneeling down to their eye level. "We're already a family. But when your mama and I get married, it will make it complete." "Will you still be our dad if you marry mama?" Kira asked. "I'll always be your dad no matter what. But marrying your mama means I get to be your dad and her husband, and we all get to be together forever." "That sounds perfect," Terrell declared. As they drove home that afternoon, legally and officially a family, Shanice thought about how perfect it really was. Not perfect in the sense of being easy or uncomplicated, but perfect in the sense of being exactly what they all needed. They'd faced doubt and legal challenges and social pressure, but they'd faced it all together. And in the end, love had won. Family had won. The commitment they'd made to each other had proven stronger than any external force that tried to tear them apart. Now all that remained was to make it complete with a wedding that would celebrate not just the love between Jonathan and Shanice, but the creation of a family that had been built on faith, hope, and the courage to believe that sometimes the most beautiful things come from the most unexpected places. 6 months later, Shanice stood on the beach in Maui watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The children were building sandcastles nearby, their laughter mixing with the sound of waves against the shore. It had been Jonathan's idea to take a family vacation to Hawaii, though she suspected he had more than relaxation on his mind. They'd spent the week snorkeling, hiking, exploring the island, and simply enjoying being together without the pressures of work and daily routines. It had been exactly what they all needed after the stress of the custody battle and adoption proceedings. "Mama, look what we found," Terrell called, running toward her with a perfect conch shell in his hands. "It's beautiful, baby. Where did you find it?" "Jonathan showed us the best spot to look for shells," Kira said, emerging from the water with her own collection of treasures. "He knows everything about the ocean." "I wouldn't say everything," Jonathan said, walking up behind them with a smile that made Shanice's heart flutter. Even after almost a year together, he still had that effect on her. "But I do know a few things about finding hidden treasures." Something in his tone made her look at him more closely. He seemed nervous, excited, like he was barely containing some important secret. "Kids," he said, "why don't you take those shells back to our spot and start sorting them? I want to talk to your mama for a minute." "Are you going to propose now?" Kira asked with the directness that 8-year-olds were famous for. Jonathan laughed. "What makes you think I'm going to propose?" "Because you've been acting weird all day, and yesterday we heard you on the phone with Grandma asking about Mama's ring size." "Kira Mitchell," Shanice said, trying to sound stern but failing because she was too busy trying not to smile. "Have you been eavesdropping?" "Not on purpose. But Jonathan talks loud when he's nervous." "Well, since my secret is apparently out," Jonathan said, "maybe you two should stay for this after all." He took Shanice's hand and led her closer to the water's edge, where the waves lapped gently at their feet. The children followed, Terrell clutching his shell and Kira practically bouncing with excitement. "Shanice," Jonathan began, his voice soft but clear over the sound of the ocean. "A year ago, I was a man who had given up on happiness. I thought love was something that happened to other people, something I'd had once and lost forever." "Jonathan. Let me finish," he said gently. "You walked into my life when I needed you most, but you didn't just save me from my grief. You showed me that love isn't a finite resource. That losing someone doesn't mean you can't love again. That families can be created by choice and commitment, not just biology." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, dropping to one knee right there in the sand as the sunset blazed behind him. "Shanice Williams, you asked me once to let you fill my lonely life with love and laughter and kindness. You've done that and so much more. You've given me purpose, joy, a reason to wake up excited about each new day. You've made me a father to two incredible children who have become the light of my life. Tears streamed down Shanice's face as she looked at this man who had changed everything for her family, who had loved them all so completely and without reservation. Will you marry me? He asked, opening the box to reveal a stunning ring that caught the last rays of sunlight. Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and Kira and Terrell? Will you help me build a future as beautiful as the life we've already created together? Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, yes, yes. Jonathan slipped the ring onto her finger as the children cheered and danced around them. When he stood up and kissed her, Shanice felt like she was flying. This was what happiness felt like. This was what forever felt like. When? She asked when they broke apart. Whenever you want. Tomorrow, next month, next year. I just want to be your husband and their father, officially and forever. How about Christmas? Kira suggested. That would be the best Christmas present ever. Christmas it is, Jonathan agreed, sweeping both children into a hug that included Shanice. Our first Christmas as an officially engaged family. The wedding took place 6 months later in the garden behind their Atlanta home, surrounded by friends, family, and the life they'd built together. Shanice's parents had flown in from North Carolina, tears of joy in their eyes as they watched their daughter marry a man who clearly adored her. Jonathan's business associates were there too, including Richard Carmichael, who had eventually come around to supporting their relationship after seeing how happy and stable Jonathan had become. But the most important guests were Kira and Terrell, who served as maid of honor and best man respectively. They stood beside their parents as vows were exchanged, as promises were made, as two people who had found each other in the darkness officially committed to walking in the light together. I promise to love you in good times and bad, Jonathan said, his voice steady and sure. To support your dreams and share your burdens. To be the husband you deserve and the father our children need. I promise to fill your life with love and laughter and kindness, Shanice replied, referencing the words that had started their journey together. To stand beside you through whatever challenges come our way. To choose you every day for the rest of my life. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Jonathan kissed his bride as their children applauded and their guests cheered, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. They were already a family in every way that mattered. The wedding was simply making it official. The reception that followed was everything a family celebration should be. Warm, joyful, filled with love and laughter. Jonathan danced with Shanice to their wedding song, then with Kira, then with both children at once while Shanice watched from the sidelines with tears of happiness in her eyes. You did it, her mother said, joining her at their table. You built the life you always wanted for those babies. We did it, Shanice corrected. All of us together. He's a good man, your Jonathan. I can see how much he loves you all. He saved us, Shanice said softly. But I think maybe we saved him too. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and the children were asleep in their beds, Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell sat on their back patio looking up at the stars. Any regrets? Jonathan asked, pulling his wife closer against his side. Only one, Shanice said. What's that? I regret that it took us so long to find each other. But maybe we found each other exactly when we were supposed to. Maybe we both needed to go through what we went through to be ready for this. Maybe you're right. Shanice turned in his arms to face him. I love you, husband. I love you too, wife. Forever and always. As they sat together under the starlit sky, surrounded by the home they'd created and the family they'd built, Shanice reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that first desperate night in a hotel room to this perfect evening as newlyweds, they traveled a road that had sometimes been difficult but had ultimately led them exactly where they belonged. Together. Forever. A family built on love, strengthened by commitment, and blessed with the kind of happiness that comes from taking risks on the most important things in life. Their story had begun with a single mom who was offered money for one night. But what she had asked for instead was so much more valuable. A lifetime of love, a partner in raising her children, and a happiness so complete it felt like a miracle. And sometimes, the most beautiful miracles are the ones that begin in the darkest moments, when two people decide to reach for each other instead of staying lost in their separate pain. Sometimes the best stories start with the most unlikely proposal and end with the most perfect yes.